This episode is for all the CEOs, COOs, all the business leaders out there who think one solo marketer can be a revenue driver, can fix growth, can run campaigns, manage vendors, run all the digital ads, sharpen strategy, and somehow hold everything together. I want to break down why this setup fails, and it's a concept I'm calling the marketing girl trap. And I say this, and I'll explain it in a little bit. I say it in the most loving way because I was once that one marketing girl. But I want to break down how this setup fails, why it's usually not her fault, what this misunderstanding costs businesses, and what companies actually need instead if they want to have a real commercial impact. And so what I want to go over is why your solo marketer cannot be your growth system. And here's the thing about this. I think internal marketing is so important. Having that heartbeat every single day of what's going on is incredibly important, but we can't have that solo marketer doing everything A to Z be your focused growth system. I want you guys to understand why sales and marketing misalignment makes the problem worse. I see it a lot. Why service-based B2B companies often misunderstand what marketing is actually supposed to do, and what kind of ownership and orchestration is actually required for that revenue impact. That's all that we're going to talk about today. But I need to do some intros. Hello, welcome to Unearth with Shelly Hughes. I'm Shelly Hughes. In this podcast, we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of running a passionate, profitable business. We talk about the wins, losses, and most importantly, lessons learned about what it takes to grow the company of your dreams. So a CEO said something recently that really stuck with me. He basically said that his, wasn't directly to me, but it was said through the grapevine and got to me, that his marketing girl was not a revenue generating position. And here's the thing, he might be right. Honestly, it says a lot about how companies think about marketing and how companies are utilizing marketing and utilizing the resources for marketing and growing their business. And I see this all the time. We work with companies anywhere from $12 million up to $50, $100 million, right? And I see this all the time. They hire one person. It's usually a generalist. She's typically younger, usually underpaid, to be honest, usually doing 12 jobs at once. Then they expect her to somehow fix growth. And when she cannot, they decide that marketing is not all that helpful. And the problem is not that she's failing at her job or failing at marketing. The problem is that the business has confused support with execution and ownership, because those are three completely different things. And I know this pattern because, like I said, I was that marketing girl, and I still see her in companies all the time. Sometimes she's 26 and she's called a marketing coordinator. Sometimes he is 46 and is called the marketing director, but it's still the same, right? Those two people typically in many companies have the same exact job. If she is he is the one pressing the send button on email campaigns and also expected to be able to develop this huge strategy, most likely someone's going to be either burnt out or displeased. And here's the thing, she is the only real marketing person in the business. So that dynamic, whether it's a 26-year-old or a 42-year-old, 46-year-old, the dynamic is the same. She's not being asked to do marketing. She's being asked to compensate for most likely ownerless growth. And so I want to tell you what this marketing girl trap typically is. And here's the thing, like I said, I want to be extremely humble here because, this is not to be, I don't want to offend anyone or anything like that, but this is what I see all the time and I have to call it out. The trap here is not hiring a solo marketer, right? The trap is expecting one tactical person to operate like a full growth engine. And what that usually looks like is she's expected to do content. She's expected to write emails. She's expected to do social. She's expected to run events. She's expected to work with a million different vendors. She's expected to do a million Canva templates because she realizes your brochure stinks. She's expected to do website updates. She's expected to maybe even run PR and do the digital ads, right? She's expected to do all these things. And most likely, especially if she's a 26-year-old, and honestly, probably the 46-year-old, She's often self-teaching because there's no senior marketing leader above her. There might be the CEO, there might be the COO for sure, but there's no one focused on marketing above her. And she's usually not in the room when key strategic decisions are made. I'm not saying she necessarily should be, but what I see all the time is that she's expected to execute a strategy that she did not create and may not fully understand, nor is it possibly was never even communicated to her, right? We deal with this all the time where we talk to it's typically the marketing girl, the one marketing girl, maybe there's two, and we say, hey, tell me what your thought is about the business strategy. And she typically has no idea what we're talking about. She is there checking off boxes. She is there making sure she gets those 3 social media posts out per week because that's the strategy, right? And she either doesn't feel like she has the authority or she's asked a million times and hasn't gotten a good answer on what exactly the business strategy is so she can align those with her marketing goals. The other thing about marketing goals is a lot of times there's not that many KPIs, or those KPIs are not directly related to business, right? So if a leader says, okay, marketing girl, please develop your Q2 KPIs, and she develops them, he'll say, that sounds great. But if a leader is not able to look at those KPIs and say, how does this directly relate qualitatively or quantitatively to business goals, then everyone's going to be disappointed. The end of Q2 is going to come. She's going to hit all of her KPIs, and the CEO is still going to think that position is not revenue generating. So that's when she gets blamed for weak outcomes that she possibly never even set up on her own. So the solo marketer is the support. She cannot be the growth system. And this episode is not aimed for that marketer. Marketing girl, solo marketing girl, if you're listening, I'm going to give you all of my praises because I know what you're going through. But it's really aimed at the CEO, COO, founder, or sales leader who expects too much from that role and too little from the system around it. I was talking to another friend of mine who's in a high-level sales role at his company. It's a fast-growing company. And I asked what the relationship is with their marketing person. It's a marketing girl. It's a young marketing girl. And he said that he barely even knows her name. She's doing some things over there. She's helping to put on a couple internal events and external events. She put up a billboard on 95, right? And that was her big thing of the year. And the fact that so many times sales and marketing don't talk to each other, whether because they don't feel the authority that they can, whether because they don't respect each other, whether operations separates them, probably not on purpose. That is something that I need leadership to realize, is that these 2 roles have to talk to each other and have to talk to each other strategically and on a peer-to-peer level. And if leadership expects one person to solve growth, leadership is massively misunderstanding the problem here. If sales and marketing are not talking, the company is creating its own internal friction, right? For that example, the marketing girl sits on a couple sales calls, but she sits in the back and she doesn't even really raise her hand, right? She might as well not even be there. So if the marketer is downstream from every decision, and I'm not saying she has to decide things, but if she is always downstream and hears it either whispered down the lane or months later, who knows, she cannot be accountable for commercial outcomes upstream. And so don't get mad at her for failing at a job that was never actually designed well. This is usually not a talent problem first. This is usually a leadership and design problem around revenue and growth. And we work with a lot of service-based and B2B businesses. And a lot of these companies misunderstand marketing because they borrow expectations from other business models. So in a typical product-based B2C company, marketing is very much known to bring in leads, right? Marketing brings in the leads, and a lot of times if it's an e-commerce business, the website sells it. Otherwise, salespeople sell it, right? Marketing brings in the quality leads through digital ads, social media, like all that kind of stuff when you're B2C and product based. And then the sales engine, whatever that looks like, sells it. It's pretty black and white who's responsible for what. In those B2C companies, marketing may play definitely a more direct lead generation role. But in service-based B2B companies, sales often brings in the leads through relationships, but whether it could be founder networks, referrals, outreach, reputation, whatever that is. But marketing and B2C, a lot of times service-based businesses, often plays a different role. They usually are the ones that nurture that trust, support in that positioning, reinforcing that credibility, enabling those sales, improving that follow-up, clarifying the message. And so that means that marketing and sales have to talk to each other, right? Same thing with B2B, but especially in service-based companies, they need to talk to each other, because in that space, a lot of times we see marketing as a lot of times the nurturing tool, where sales it's almost the opposite, right? Sales brings in the leads a lot of the time, and marketing is the nurturing tool. And that means that if they are disconnected, the marketer typically gets blamed for revenue while working really without visibility of what sales actually needs or what buyers are responding to. In both situations, if you're a B2B company, if you're a product-based B2B company, salespeople have to communicate, or we have to look at data, and we can actually look at website metrics to see, okay, people converting or are they not converting? Okay, we can bring in all the quality leads that we want, but if our conversion tool, whether it's a person or your website, is not aligned, that's a red flag, right? Or maybe marketing is just not converting leads. From a B2B perspective, they still have to talk to each other, because marketing needs to hear directly from sales about what people are saying, and sales has to learn directly from marketing what they're hearing, because a lot of times they might be different stories because they're in different parts of the customer journey. So in many service-based businesses, marketing is not really a lead machine. It is part of a trust building and relationship nurturing system. For this poor marketing girl, this is an impossible job in many situations that I've seen and I've experienced myself. Most companies hire a generalist and expect a strategist, an operator, an analyst, a channel expert, a multi-channel expert, really. This person could be dealing with 5, 6, 7, 10 different channels, all expected to have the same level of priority and all expected to do the same exact job. She's expected essentially to be the revenue leader. A lot of times these founders and CEOs, expect excellence across all of it. And also, they often do not pay enough to get that level of expertise. Here's the thing, if you're going to pay someone a high enough salary, you don't want them doing the tactical things like pressing the send on email blasts, right? So there's this discrepancy in the marketing field where, okay, it's a lower paying position and they're task-oriented things, tactical-oriented things. That makes sense. But we cannot expect that person to also be the revenue driver and the strategy person, because that's a completely different brain, completely different experience level. And because, too, they expect a lot of strategic output from someone buried from tactical execution. And so when you hired a generalist and expected really a growth architect, that's where the disconnection happens a lot. And so why the marketer keeps looking unhelpful, right? She looks unhelpful because the business is measuring her against outcomes that she does not have control over, most likely. Nor does she have enough hours in the day to self-teach herself all of these things, learn them, and excel at them. She may be working hard, but she's probably working on the wrong things. We talk all the time where, we might do a diagnostic and the marketing person might say, yeah, we're doing SEO, we're doing all these things. And we ask, why are you doing SEO? Your buyer doesn't purchase this type of product through a Google search or an AI search. And they're like, we just thought we needed to do that, right? So these poor marketing girls who don't even have time to sit down and be like, okay, why are we actually doing this? Is it really helping us? And they might not have the experience to do that. They might not have the authority, right? I was talking to one of our podcast people, and I realized she was spending so much time editing podcasts. I'm like, what is taking up so much time? And with this specific client, it's how it's always been done, where we cut out every single pause, every single stutter, everything. And how it's always been done is they called it 90% professional, 10% human. I said, wait a second, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard from a podcast. This specific one is between two close acquaintances, colleagues and friends, and it is, why would we cut out 90% of the human element of that relationship? And she was like, it's just the way it's always been done. And I'm like, I think it's going to be, and here's the thing, I might be completely wrong. And this is definitely different for every single podcast. Every podcast has its own unique intricacies and way it presents itself. But my point is, just because it's always been done that way, this poor marketing girl doesn't always have the time or the bandwidth or the mental real estate to step back and say, why are we actually doing this? One of our clients, they just hired marketing coordinator, whom, by the way, I love marketing coordinators. I love that lone marketing girl because we need that person, right? But I'm just saying, I'm talking about multiple different clients right now, and it's all the same story. So they hired this new person. She's starting next week, and we are coming in as fractional CMO, fractional chief revenue officer, really helping with the strategy side of the business and looking at commercial strategy, looking at profit margins, looking at operational leadership, like all that kind of stuff. But he said he needed help to figure out how to onboard this person. We said, yeah, love that. We can certainly do that. One thing that I know is that even though we try to be as involved as we can in a company, it doesn't always mean that we're in the day-to-day, right? And so idea came up in the meeting and I said, okay, this is a new person. She has some marketing experience. She knows the industry, which is good. What I want to do is give her a piece of paper that she's going to carry around for the first 3 weeks of her working there. And what it's going to say is a list from 1 to 50 and blanks next to each one. And the title of this paper is going to say the 50 things that make me go, with that little emoji, right? The questioning emoji. And I told it was the CEO, I said, I want her to get in there and every little thing, as tiny as she can think of or as big as she can think of, in sales meetings that she's in going through the SOP, in understanding the marketing strategy, all these different things that just make her go, why do they do it that way? Well, that's kind of weird. Why is this person talking and not this? And I want that to happen because it allows for that we've always done it this way mentality to be questioned, and in a way that we could never do because we're not in there every single day. And so that's something that I recommend you do for every single position. But selfishly, this is going to help us because we're going to be able to get into the behind the scenes. We've pulled up the skirt plenty, but it's going to be even more and really help this client in a much deeper way from a revenue and growth perspective. So this person, right, we have to realize that she might not have the authority to push back on bad requests, right? If that's another thing about this person, if sales is asking her to do one thing, if operations is asking her to do another thing, sometimes even HR asks the marketing girl to do all the internal parties and stuff like that. Sometimes they're even the party planning committee, right? A lot of times she doesn't have the authority to push back, right? She might ask to prioritize, but she doesn't have one kind of direct line of communication with everyone because she might be pushed around to all these different departments. She might not know what sales needs, and she might be filling a calendar with activity because nobody senior has really clarified what actually matters and what's going to move the needle. So what this does is a lot of times companies see motion, right? Activity is happening, but they're not really sure why it's not turning into momentum. And so a lot of times the marketing is doing the labor, but no one really is doing the orchestration. So what could this cost a business, right? This is not just unfair to the marketer. This is extremely expensive for the entire company. What this could look like is burnout and turnover. We see that a lot. A lot of times for the younger marketing person, they might stay for a year or two and say, I'm not getting what I need. I'm not getting the leadership I need. I'm teaching myself everything and this isn't for me. And they leave. If it is a lot of times, if it's that's a 26-year-old, a lot of times if it's the 46-year-old, many times, not all the time, for sure not all the time, but it can turn into complacency, right? She probably has young kids or he has young kids. She's probably the mover and shaker of buttons and telling the operator, for lack of a better term. But a lot of times that turns into complacency. I had another conversation with someone else who has the 46-year-old marketing person and the single marketing person, and he wasn't getting the outcome that he wanted. And I met him at an event, and we hit it off, and he was talking to me about his marketing person in her 40s. She's doing her best, but he doesn't think he's getting a lot out of her. And I told him this theory, right? And after that, he went back to her and said, okay, I'm going away for a week. By Friday afternoon, by Friday at 5, I would love for you to come with a marketing strategy, right? To figure out how we can grow. And she said, okay. Friday at about 4:30, something got delivered in his email and he read it. And I had lunch with him after this happened. So I was like, oh, how did that go? He said that it was the most generic ChatGPT marketing strategy he's ever seen. He said it was so half-assed. And even when he went to revision history, he realized that she didn't start that until that morning. And it was very much a copy and paste, and she edited some things. Like he could see the revision history. And she got fired quickly after that. Here's the thing, and I told him this. He set her up for failure. Most likely, she had no idea what the marketing strategy, what direction it should have gone, because she probably didn't know what the business goals were. Also, she's probably if she's every day so tactical, how is she going to be able to step back and think big when she has 3 social media posts to draft for the next week, right? Those aren't going away. And so it's a lot of times it costs a business so much because of either burnout and turnover for the 26-year-old, complacency for the 46-year-old, and wasted spend on probably disconnected tactics. Again, putting all this effort into writing blog posts when SEO isn't a way to get people in. Not that blog posts could be with case studies and nurturing and stuff like that for sure, but I'm just saying from an SEO perspective. There's a lot of founder frustration, weak reporting, sales and marketing tension, poor handoffs, a lot of ownerless growth, and then no real confidence about what the heck is actually working and what's not, because most of it seems like it's not working. And so you don't just burn out the marketer, you create this fragile growth. What this also does is marketing and sales, marketing and CEO, marketing CFO, they all speak different languages. A lot of times the CEO and CFO and sales speak a very similar language. The marketing person, many times we've seen, speaks a different language. And this can be all the way from the marketing coordinator to the CMO. Recently read an article that said the CMO is the shortest held position in the C-suite. And it's because of a few different reasons. One, a lot of times they are not involved in business direction or strategy, which I think is ridiculous, but they're not involved in a lot of those conversations. So they get it downstream. And 2, they talk in marketing language. They do not talk in CEO, CFO language. And so that means that they talk about the metrics that they care about. All these green arrows right up and to the right about website metrics, about and traffic, about social media, about leads, about all these different things. And then the lead guys are like, yeah, our sales are down. And then the CFO says our sales are down. And the CEO says our sales are down. And this poor CMO or marketing coordinator is talking about website traffic, right? And I'm not saying website traffic is not a good key performance indicator, but so many times marketers, they go to communication school. They don't go to business school. And so they're almost talking different languages. So even when you're C-suite CMO, you still are on the chopping block all the time. And that's why marketing gets a short end of the stick and is blamed and is a scapegoat for so many problems that probably are not even marketing problems because they just don't speak the same language. And that I see as a big issue in the marketing space in general, but especially when you're talking about a younger solo marketing department, basically. And so what companies actually need? If you want revenue impact, you need ownership and orchestration. Someone senior who has to own that growth logic, expectations definitely need to match that role. Sales and marketing need real communication rhythm. A marketer needs support sometimes, guidance sometimes, prioritization all the time, right? I asked one of our clients this one time, I asked her, she's the marketing director, 46 years old, and she's the sole marketing director of this decently sized company. And I asked her, I'm like, what do you actually want to do? Because she was a marketing director, but we were talking strategy and she enjoyed it, but I felt some hesitation. I said, do you like to do the creative work? Do you like to do the campaigns and the content and that kind of stuff? Or do you actually like directing the marketing, i.e. what her title is? And she said, honestly, Shelly, I like doing the campaigns. I like doing the creative work. And so that's a huge thing that you have to think about too, is what does this person want to be doing? Do they want to be executing or do they want to be directing? Because very few people are good at both and almost no one can do both. Strategy cannot only live in the CEO's head. It cannot only live in the COO's head. Strategy has to be simply but yet comprehensively communicated to the entire organization so everyone knows the direction. We have another client where they don't have a very strong, okay, where do we want to be in 10 years? Where do we want to be in 5 years? Where do we want to be in 3 years? And what's our 1-year plan? And if you don't have that, morale's going to drop, right? Morale isn't directly aligned with this like mission-driven brand, or you have to be part of a nonprofit to have high morale and want people to all go in the same mission or all go in the same direction. But you at least need a direction, and that direction needs to be communicated. And it's not just for the marketing's sake, it's for everyone, right? It's for everyone. If people can't envision where they're trying to get the company to, then they're going to feel purposeless in their position. Companies need to know the difference between help and leadership. And what that looks like is the solo marketer, most likely that is support and execution. Solo marketing director, often still support and execution, especially if they're alone. And that if you do have some kind of a senior growth owner, a CMO, a fractional leader, that's where ownership, prioritization, cross-functional alignment, and that orchestration really comes in. And so most of these companies, they do not need a better marketing girl, right? They need a better operating model. So I'm not saying to solo marketers that they do not matter, right? We usually don't even bring on a client unless they have someone in-house that their sole focus is marketing. A lot of times this is marketing girl, right? They are critical to our success and relationships with clients that we really think about onboarding a new client if they don't have this person. So they are so important. Here's the thing. A lot of companies put them in impossible roles. They starve them of context. They leave them out of strategy. They disconnect them from sales. They overload them with tactics and then act surprised when they do not move revenue or they are not, quote, revenue generating positions. It just makes me laugh because that is not proof that marketing doesn't work. It's proof that ownerless growth does not work. So if you have one person in marketing, expect her to fix growth, align sales, run campaigns, improve messaging, manage vendors, and somehow turn all of that into revenue in her 40 hours. You do not have a people problem. You have an ownership problem. And a solo marketer can support growth, but she cannot be your growth system. I hope that helps. I know I was talking to this a lot with different clients and things, so I'm definitely going to send this around. But if you also know someone that would benefit from hearing this, maybe you are the marketing girl and you want to very gently give this to your leadership, it might not be a bad idea. So share this with someone you think would benefit from it. Sharing really helps get these podcasts in the earbuds of people who need to hear them. Also, please rate and review the podcast. Most people who listen to this podcast are not following, they're not rating, they're not reviewing it. And it is this smallest little algorithmic help you can do for us to make sure that we're getting into the earbuds of people that need to hear this stuff. Guys, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.